This Battlefield Ledger briefing gives you the key updates on the Ukraine conflict as of December 26, 2024. We're using open source reports, satellite imagery, and of course, intercepted communications to get you the most important takeaways.
Let's start by looking at Russian offensive operations. Despite some heavy losses, their main focus is still on capturing Donetsk Oblast. They've actually resumed a push towards Pokrovsk, trying to use a turning maneuver from the south.
So, a turning maneuver is when they try to encircle a city or force to cut off supply lines and then force a surrender. It looks like it's led to some gains, but they're paying a high price for every inch.
Ukrainian sources are reporting nearly 3,000 Russian casualties in the last 2 weeks in that one sector alone. This really aggressive push just shows how much the Kremlin wants to take the entire Donetsk Oblast, even if it means terrible losses. They've even chosen to focus on this objective instead of trying to push back on Ukrainian forces in Kursk Oblast.
So, even though their forces are being stretched thin, they're choosing Donetsk over pushing back on that incursion into Kursk. It really highlights where their strategic priorities lie.
And there could be some organizational reasons behind this as well. Intelligence suggests that the 41st Combined Arms Army has been strangely inactive. They've been operating in that area. We don't know for sure if they're being redeployed or if they're just on an operational pause, but it's something to definitely keep an eye on.
Now moving on to the Siversk direction, we've seen a pretty notable shift in Russian tactics.
Yeah, they recently launched a much larger mechanized assault in that sector. We're talking battalion-sized compared to their usual much smaller scale attacks. It ultimately failed, but it shows us that they are learning and adapting.
So they're not giving up on restoring their ability to maneuver on the battlefield. They're trying new things, even if they're still far from achieving the kind of large-scale movements we saw earlier in the conflict.
Ukrainian forces are still holding their ground in Kursk Oblast after their incursion back in.
And they're not making things easy for the Russian and allied forces there. Reports say that the North Korean troops deployed to the region are struggling, having some issues with communication, taking a lot of casualties.
Not exactly the kind of experienced reinforcements the Kremlin was hoping for. On the other hand, Ukrainian forces have been having some success with their counterattacks, particularly around Pokrovsk and Svatova. They've even managed to retake some of the positions they lost.
And they're not just holding the line. Ukraine's getting really creative. We've seen reports of the first ever ground attack carried out only using unmanned ground vehicles, UGVs, and drones. This is a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. It really shows their willingness to embrace new technologies, use them to offset their manpower limitations. They're making the best of what they've got and finding innovative ways to use it. That's a major advantage in modern warfare.
Of course, Western military aid is a huge factor in all of this. The latest US aid packages have been pretty substantial, including ammunition for HIMARS, Stinger Manpads missiles, and a lot of counter-drone systems, which they really need. All of this is essential if Ukraine is going to keep up its operational tempo.
And it's definitely having an impact. These supplies are helping Ukraine inflict heavy losses on the Russian forces and preventing them from achieving their goals. Can't overstate the impact these weapons are having. They're a direct factor in the Ukrainian resistance.
All right, let's move on to the internal dynamics inside Russia. The pressure is definitely building. We're starting to see some cracks in the facade.
The Ukrainian incursion into Kursk Oblast has really exposed some of that internal tension. Instead of taking responsibility, the Kremlin is trying to shift the blame away from the military, trying to pin it on local officials. They're really trying to deflect any criticism as this conflict keeps dragging on.
Yeah, shows how concerned they are about their image, and they're struggling to generate enough manpower despite increasing their recruitment efforts.
Yeah, these losses are really hurting the Russian economy. We're seeing labor shortages rising, inflation becoming major issues. The longer this war goes on, the worse those pressures will become. It's getting tougher for them to keep the needs of the war balanced against the needs of their own people.
And that economic impact is being felt way beyond Russia's borders too. We're seeing some really big shifts internationally. For instance, Poland has offered to send Ukraine its entire fleet of MiG-29 fighter jets. The transfer would happen through the US.
Really underlines the level of international support Ukraine is getting. These fighter jets could be a game changer on the battlefield.
Thanks for watching this Battlefield Ledger briefing. Make sure to subscribe for more updates and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay informed.